The Promised Land. Lena Whitmore stood in the dust of a town she'd never seen, staring at a man she'd never met, the stranger who was now her husband. At 18, she'd traded everything familiar for a single promise scrawled in careful script. I need a wife. You'll have a home. No mention of love. No talk of forever. Just necessity wrapped in vows. Caleb Rourke waited beside a weathered wagon, two silent children at his sides, his eyes holding questions he wouldn't ask. She'd come west to escape one kind of emptiness. She hadn't expected to find another. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far Lena's story travels. And if her journey moves you, hit that like button and stay until the end. You won't want to miss where this road leads. The stagecoach lurched to a stop, sending a cloud of amber dust through the open window. Lena pressed her handkerchief to her mouth, tasting grit and distance. 3 days of rattling bones and sleepless nights had brought her here, to a town that looked like it had been sketched in haste and left unfinished. False front buildings lined a single rutted street. A few horses stood hip-shot at hitching rails. Somewhere, a dog barked. She was the only passenger to disembark. The driver hauled her trunk down without ceremony, tipped his hat, and climbed back up. The stage rolled on, leaving her standing in the middle of Montana territory with a battered suitcase, a wool traveling dress too warm for August, and a name she'd only seen in letters. Caleb Rourke. She scanned the street. A woman in a faded calico dress paused on the boardwalk, eyes sharp and assessing. Two men outside the mercantile stopped talking to stare. Lena straightened her spine and ignored them all. Then she saw him. He stood beside a buckboard wagon across the street, tall and lean, hat brim low enough to shadow his face. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands rested too carefully at his sides. Beside him, two children watched her with identical expressions of solemn curiosity, a girl in braids clutching a cornhusk doll, a boy older and harder-faced, arms crossed tight against his chest. Lena's heart hammered. She forced her feet to move. The man, Caleb, stepped forward as she approached. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair threaded with early gray, a weathered face that might have been handsome if it weren't so carefully blank. His eyes were gray-blue, like winter sky. Miss Whitmore. His voice was quiet, roughened by disuse or caution. I'm Caleb Rourke. Mr. Rourke. Her own voice sounded steadier than she felt. A silence stretched between them, awkward and weighted. The little girl shifted closer to her father's leg. The boy's jaw tightened. These are my children, Caleb said finally. Evan, May. Lena crouched slightly, meeting May's eyes. The girl couldn't have been more than 7, all knobby knees and serious face. Hello, May. That's a beautiful doll. May's fingers tightened on the toy. She didn't smile. Evan, perhaps 10, stared past Lena toward the empty road. She's younger than I thought she'd be. Evan. The single word from Caleb held warning. The boy shrugged, defiant and miserable at once. Lena rose slowly. I'm 18. Old enough. Old enough for what? Evan's eyes were his father's, sharp and guarded. To keep my word. She held his gaze until he looked away. Caleb gestured toward the wagon. We should go. It's a 2-hour drive to the ranch. He lifted her trunk into the bed with easy strength, then helped her onto the bench seat. The children climbed into the back without being told, settling among sacks of flour and coiled rope. Caleb took up the reins. The wagon creaked into motion. The town fell away behind them. For a long while, no one spoke. The landscape opened up in all directions. Rolling grassland, the color of dried honey, distant mountains bruised purple against the horizon. The sky stretched impossibly wide, unmarked by smoke or steeple. Lena had never seen so much emptiness. It made her chest feel tight. You came a long way, Caleb said eventually. Pennsylvania. Got people there? Not anymore. He didn't press. She was grateful. The silence returned, but it felt different now, less hostile, more cautious. She studied him from the corner of her eye. His hands on the reins were scarred and capable, his profile carved by wind and sun. He didn't look cruel. He didn't look kind either. He looked tired. Behind them, May began to hum softly, a tuneless, wandering melody. Evan told her to hush. She didn't. "How long has it been?" Lena asked quietly. "Since their mother." 2 years. Caleb's voice went flat. "Last winter." "I'm sorry." "So am I." The words held no invitation to sympathy. Lena understood. She'd worn grief like that once, sharp-edged and private, something you carried alone because sharing it only made it heavier. She turned her attention back to the land. Ahead, a thread of green marked a creek. Cottonwoods clustered there, their leaves shimmering silver in the breeze. As they drew closer, she saw the ranch, a low house of weathered logs, a barn, corrals stitched from rough-cut posts, a scatter of outbuildings. Chickens pecked in the yard. Laundry hung motionless on a line. It looked like hard work. It looked like loneliness. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop near the porch. May scrambled down before he could help her, racing toward the chickens. Evan jumped off the other side and headed straight for the barn, shoulders hunched. "I'll get your trunk," Caleb said. Lena climbed down on her own, smoothing her skirts. The air smelled of dust and sage and something cooking, beans maybe, or stew. She followed Caleb inside. The house was dim and spare. A table, chairs, a cook stove. Shelves, holding tin plates and cups. A rocking chair near the cold hearth. Everything clean but worn, used hard and not replaced. On the wall above the fireplace, a framed tintype showed a young woman with dark hair and a gentle smile, the first wife, frozen in silver in memory. Lena looked away. "Your room's through there." Caleb nodded toward a door on the left. "I sleep out back. The children are upstairs." She blinked. "Separate rooms." Seemed right. His jaw worked. "This marriage, it's for the children, for the work. I won't ask more than that." Heat crawled up her neck. She'd known the arrangement was practical, but hearing it stated so plainly made something in her chest twist. "I see. The Reverend comes through next month. We'll make it legal then." He set her trunk down with a thud. "Until then, you're welcome to rest. May will want supper soon." "I can cook." "Expected you could." He paused at the door. "Lena." She turned. "I know this isn't—" He stopped, searching for words. "I'll do right by you. Won't be easy, but I'll keep my part. And I'll keep mine." He nodded once and left. Lena stood alone in the small room that would be hers, a narrow bed, a chest, a washstand. The window looked out toward the creek. She sank onto the quilt, faded, hand-stitched, probably made by the woman in the photograph, and pressed her palms to her knees. She'd come here because there was nowhere else. Her parents were dead, her father's debts scattered to creditors, the house sold. A cousin had offered charity, but Lena had seen the resentment in her eyes. When the advertisement appeared, "Widower seeks wife, children need mother," she'd answered. Now she was here, married to a stranger, mother to children who looked at her like she was trying to steal something that wasn't hers. A knock rattled the door. "Miss Lena?" May's voice, small and uncertain. Lena opened the door. May stood in the hall, doll clutched tight, eyes round. "Papa says it's time for supper. He says you don't gotta cook tonight, but maybe tomorrow." "I can cook tonight." May chewed her lip. "You know how?" "I do." "Mama used to make biscuits. Real good ones." Lena crouched. "I make biscuits too. Maybe not as good as your mama's, but I'll do my best." May studied her solemnly. "You gonna stay?" The question hit harder than it should have. "Yes, I'm gonna stay." "Evan says you'll leave when you see how hard it is." "Evan's wrong." May didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "Supper's usually beans and cornbread. There's bacon if we got any." "Then let's see what we can do." The kitchen felt foreign under her hands, but Lena had cooked in worse conditions. She found lard, cornmeal, salt. The beans were already simmering, seasoned with onion and a ham hock. She mixed batter, heated the skillet, poured careful rounds. May watched from the table, silent but present. Evan came in when the smell filled the house. He didn't speak, just washed his hands at the basin and sat down hard in his chair. Caleb followed, hat in hand, face unreadable. They ate without ceremony. The cornbread was decent, the beans were fine. No one said much. Caleb asked Evan about the fence line. Evan grunted answers. May picked at her food, stealing glances at Lena. When the meal ended, Caleb stood. I'll see to the stock. Evan, you're with me. The boy rose without argument, following his father into the dusk. Lena cleared the table. May lingered, hovering near the stove. You want help? I'd like that. Together they washed the dishes, May drying each plate with exaggerated care, tongue caught between her teeth. Outside, the sky deepened to indigo. A coyote called high and lonesome. Do you miss Pennsylvania? May asked suddenly. Lena considered. I miss some things, but this is home now. Evan says this'll never be your home, says you're just pretending. Lena set down the dish rag. What do you think? May's eyes were too old for 7. I think you're scared. Like me. You're right, I am scared. But you're staying anyway? Yes. May nodded slowly, as if filing this information away. Mama was scared too before she died. She made me promise to be good, to help Papa. Lena's throat tightened. I bet you're very good at helping. Sometimes. May's voice went small. Sometimes I forget things. I can't remember her voice anymore, just her face. Lena knelt, meeting her eyes. That doesn't mean you loved her any less. Tears welled but didn't fall. May blinked them back fiercely. I don't want to forget. You won't. Not the important parts. May wiped her nose on her sleeve. You're not like I thought you'd be. What did you think? I don't know. Meaner, maybe, or faker. Lena smiled faintly. I'm just tired. Me too. They finished the dishes in companionable quiet. When Caleb and Evan returned, smelling of hay and horse, May was already yawning. Caleb sent her upstairs with a gentle hand on her shoulder. Evan disappeared after her without a word. Lena dried her hands. I should... Thank you, Caleb said abruptly. For supper. For helping May. It's what I came to do. Still, he shifted his weight. I know this isn't easy. It's not easy for any of us. He looked at her then, really looked, searching her face for something. Whatever he found, it made his shoulders ease a fraction. Get some rest. Morning comes early. How early? Before the sun. She nodded. I'll be ready. He almost smiled. I believe you will. Lena retreated to her room and closed the door. She changed into her nightgown, unpinned her hair, and sat on the edge of the bed. Through the thin walls, she could hear the sounds of the house settling, footsteps overhead, the creak of ropes supporting a mattress, the low murmur of Caleb's voice telling the children good night. She lay down and stared at the ceiling. This was her life now. These strangers were her family. This hard, lonely place was home. She thought of the reverend who would come next month, the vows that would make it legal. She thought of Evan's distrust and May's fragile hope. She thought of Caleb's careful distance, the way he'd offered her a separate room like it was kindness instead of isolation. Sleep came slowly, threaded with the unfamiliar sounds of a new world. Wind in the eaves, and owl hunting, the restless shifting of horses in the barn. When dawn broke, Lena rose with it. The days bled together in a rhythm of relentless work. Lena learned the cadence of the ranch, up before light to stoke the stove, coffee, boiling while she mixed biscuit dough, breakfast on the table before Caleb and Evan headed out to mend fences or move cattle. May shadowed her through morning chores, gathering eggs, feeding chickens, hauling water from the creek. The work was harder than anything Lena had known. Her hands blistered, then calloused, her back ached, but she didn't complain. Caleb noticed. She saw it in the way he paused sometimes, watching her heft a bucket or wrestle wet laundry onto the line. He never offered to lighten her load. She didn't expect him to. This was the bargain. Evan remained a closed door. He spoke to her only when necessary, his answers clipped and cool. At meals, he ate in silence, eyes on his plate. Lena didn't push. She'd been angry once too, at fate, at circumstance, at the people who tried to fix things that couldn't be fixed. May, though. May was warming. The girl began to linger after chores, asking small questions. Why do you pin your hair that way? Did you have chickens in Pennsylvania? Can you read? Lena answered honestly, and slowly, carefully, May began to trust. One afternoon, while Lena mended a shirt, May appeared with her corn-husk doll. Her name's Alice. Mama made her. She's beautiful. May sat cross-legged on the floor. Mama used to tell stories about a girl who lived in the woods and talked to animals. What kind of animals? Deer and rabbits, and a bear who was really a prince. Lena smiled. Sounds like a good story. I can't remember the end. May's face crumpled. I keep trying, but it's gone. Lena set down her sewing. Maybe we could make up a new ending. May looked up, hopeful and uncertain. You think that's okay? I think your mama would want the story to keep going. They spent the rest of the afternoon spinning a tale, May offering pieces, Lena weaving them together. By the time Caleb and Evan returned, the girl with the animals had found her prince, and May was smiling. Caleb paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. Something shifted in his expression, brief and unguarded, before he turned away. That night, after the children were asleep, Lena sat on the porch to escape the house's lingering heat. The stars were impossibly bright, scattered like salt across black velvet. She heard the door open, boots on wood. Caleb sat on the step below her, hat in his hands. For a long moment, neither spoke. You're good with her, he said finally. May. She's easy to love. Evan's harder. Evan's protecting himself. Caleb turned the hat in his hands. His mother, Sarah, she was gentle, patient. Everything I'm not. His voice roughened. I don't know how to be what they need. You're their father. That's enough. Is it? He looked out at the dark. I brought you here because I couldn't do it alone. But I don't know if that was fair. To you. To them. Lena chose her words carefully. I didn't come here expecting fair. I came because I needed a place and you needed help. That's honest, at least. Honest. He huffed a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. Yeah, I suppose it is. Silence settled again, but it felt less heavy now. A breeze stirred the cottonwoods. Somewhere, a nightbird called. I won't ask you to love them, Caleb said quietly. But if you can care for them, give them steadiness, that's more than I hoped for. Lena's chest tightened. I'll do my best. He stood, settling his hat back on. That's all any of us can do. He went inside, leaving her alone with the stars. Walked out. The Reverend arrived on a blustery September morning, riding a gray mare and carrying a worn Bible in his saddlebag. He was older, with kind eyes and a habit of tugging his collar when he spoke. Caleb met him in the yard, and together they went inside. Lena stood at the stove, heart hammering. May pressed close to her side. Evan watched from the corner, arms crossed. The Reverend smiled at her. Miss Whitmore, I understand you've come to make a new life here. Yes, sir. And you enter this union willingly. She glanced at Caleb. He stood stiff and formal, face unreadable. I do. Mr. Rourke, do you take this woman as your lawful wife to honor and provide for so long as you both shall live? I do. And you, Miss Whitmore, do you take this man as your lawful husband to stand beside in hardship and in hope? Lena swallowed. I do. The Reverend spoke the words that bound them, simple, spare, stripped of romance. When it was done, he closed the Bible. You may seal your union. Caleb stepped forward. Lena's pulse jumped. He took her hand, calloused palm against calloused palm, and squeezed once, briefly. Then he let go. The Reverend stayed for a meal, speaking of weather and distant congregations. When he left, the house felt smaller, more real. Lena was married now, truly married. That night, she lay in her narrow bed and listened to the house breathe. In the room beyond, Caleb moved quietly, settling in for the night. The walls between them might as well have been miles. She'd come west for survival. She'd found duty instead. But as the days turned to weeks, something else began to grow. Not love, not yet, but the fragile beginning of something steadier. Respect, maybe. Or the slow, cautious hope that survival wasn't all there was. In the mornings, Caleb left coffee waiting for her. In the evenings, May reached for her hand. Even Evan, once or twice, forgot to scowl. It wasn't the life Lena had imagined. but it was hers, and for now, that was enough. October brought frost that silvered the grass and turned the creek's edge to lace. Lena woke to the cold seeping through the walls, her breath misting in the dim light. She dressed quickly, layered her shawl over her shoulders, and made her way to the kitchen. The stove's fire had died overnight. She rebuilt it from embers, coaxing flame from kindling, feeding it split wood until heat began to push back the chill. Caleb appeared as the coffee started to boil, his hair damp from washing at the pump. He nodded his thanks when she poured his cup, their fingers brushing briefly as he took it. The touch was accidental, unthinking, but Lena felt it linger on her skin as she turned back to the stove. "Storm's coming," he said, looking toward the window. "Need to bring the cattle down from the high pasture before it hits. How long do we have?" "Day, maybe 2. He drank his coffee standing, the way he always did. "I'll take Evan. We'll be gone most of the day." "I'll have supper ready." He set the empty cup on the table. "Lena." She turned. "If the weather turns before we're back, bar the door. Keep May inside." Something in his tone made her pulse quicken. "You think it'll be that bad?" "Could be." He reached for his hat. "Just be careful." "I will." He left with Evan before the sun cleared the mountains. Lena watched them ride out, 2 dark figures against the pale grass, until they disappeared into the roll of the land. Then she turned to the work that waited. May helped with the chickens, her small hands gentle as she reached into nest for eggs. "Papa looked worried," she said quietly. "He's being cautious." "That's good." "Last time there was a big storm, Mama got sick." May's voice went smaller. "She never got better." Lena crouched beside her, tucking a loose braid behind the girl's ear. "Your papa and Evan will be home before dark, and we'll have a warm fire and hot food waiting." May nodded, but her eyes stayed troubled. "What if they don't come back?" "They will." "But what if—" "May," Lena took the girl's hands. "I know you're scared, but worrying won't change what happens. All we can do is what's in front of us. Can you do that with me?" May's chin trembled, then steadied. "Okay." They worked through the morning, laundry scrubbed and wrung and hung on the line, bread kneaded and set to rise, the floor swept clean. By midday, clouds had begun to mass on the western horizon, heavy and bruised-looking. The wind picked up, rattling the loose board on the barn door. Lena brought the laundry in before it was fully dry and latched the shutters. May watched from the window, nose pressed to the glass. "I don't see them yet." "They'll come when they come." But Lena's own unease was growing. The air felt charged, electric, the way it had before summer storms in Pennsylvania. She checked their stores, firewood stacked near the door, water buckets filled, candles and matches ready. The bread had risen. She shaped it into loaves and set them to bake, filling the house with the smell of yeast and warmth. The first drops of rain hit just as she pulled the bread from the oven. Within minutes it became a downpour, drumming on the roof, turning the yard to mud. May ran to Lena's side, pressing close. "They're still out there." "They're tough. They know this land." Thunder rolled across the valley, low and resonant. May flinched. Lena wrapped an arm around her shoulders, feeling the girl's heart racing like a trapped bird. They waited. An hour passed. 2. The storm showed no sign of easing. Rain sheeted sideways, driven by wind that howled around the corners of the house. Lightning split the sky, close enough that the thunder came almost instantly, shaking the walls. May started to cry, quiet, hiccuping sobs that she tried to muffle against Lena's dress. "Shh! It's all right." "What if the lightning hits them? What if the horses bolt? What if—" "May, listen to me." Lena turned the girl to face her. "Your papa has lived through 100 storms. He knows how to keep himself and Evan safe. Do you believe that?" May's eyes were wide and wet. "I think so." "Then hold on to that. Can you do that for me?" May nodded shakily. Lena built up the fire and set stew to simmer. She lit candles against the early dark and tried to keep her own fear from showing. But as the afternoon bled into evening and still Caleb and Evan didn't return, her composure began to fray. She stood at the window, peering through the rain-streaked glass into the gathering gloom. The world beyond had disappeared into gray water and wind. Anything could be out there. Anything could have happened. Then, through the noise of the storm, she heard it, the whinny of a horse. "They're here!" May bolted for the door. "Wait!" Lena caught her arm. "Let me look first." She opened the door a crack. Rain lashed in, soaking her immediately. Two shapes moved through the downpour, leading horses toward the barn. Relief flooded through her so strong it made her knees weak. "It's them! Come on!" They ran into the rain together, May slipping in the mud. Lena caught her, half carried her the last few yards. Caleb and Evan were stripping saddles in the barn, both drenched to the skin, Evan's lips blue with cold. "Get inside," Caleb ordered. "We'll be there in a minute." Lena herded May back to the house and stoked the fire high. She laid out dry clothes, heated water, pulled the stew close to the heat. When Caleb and Evan finally came in, they were shivering, water puddling at their feet. "Upstairs," Lena told Evan. "Change into dry things. I'll bring hot water." The boy didn't argue. He took the stairs 2 at a time, teeth chattering. Caleb stood dripping by the door, looking exhausted. "Got the cattle down. Just in time." "You're frozen. Go change. I'll have food ready." He nodded and disappeared into his room. Lena carried hot water upstairs for Evan, knocked, and left it outside his door. When she came back down, Caleb had changed into dry shirt and trousers, his hair standing in damp spikes. He moved to the fire, holding his hands to the heat. "That was close," he said quietly. "Too close." He glanced at her, and for the first time she saw real emotion break through his careful reserve. Relief, weariness, something that might have been gratitude. May was scared. So was I. His expression shifted. "You were?" "Of course I was. You were out in that with—" She stopped, surprised by the heat in her own voice. "With my family." The word hung between them. Caleb's eyes searched hers. "Your family?" he repeated slowly. Lena's face warmed. "That's what we are, aren't we? On paper, at least." "Yeah." His voice had gone rough. "I suppose we are." Evan came downstairs, still pale but no longer shaking. May attached herself to his side, chattering with relieved energy about the storm, the lightning, how scared she'd been. He tolerated it with his usual stoicism, but Lena saw his hand rest briefly on his sister's head, an absent, protective gesture that made her chest ache. They ate stew and fresh bread, the warmth and food bringing color back to everyone's faces. The storm continued its assault outside, but the house held firm. The fire pushed back the cold, and slowly the fear that had gripped them all began to ease. After supper, May begged for a story. Lena looked to Caleb, expecting him to refuse, but he just nodded. One story, then bed. They sat by the fire. May curled against Lena's side, Evan cross-legged on the floor, pretending not to listen, Caleb in the chair he'd pulled close. Lena told the tale they'd been building, the girl and her animal friends, adding new pieces, following May's breathless suggestions. The prince had been enchanted by a jealous sorcerer. The girl had to cross 3 mountains to break the spell. The deer and the rabbits helped her, and in the end, the bear prince was freed. "And they lived happily ever after?" May asked hopefully. "They did," Lena said, "because she was brave and she didn't give up." May sighed contentedly and yawned. "Like you." Lena's throat tightened. "Like all of us." Caleb rose. "Bed. Both of you." The children went without protest, worn out from fear and relief. Lena heard them moving overhead, the creak of bed ropes, whispered good nights, then silence. She began clearing the table. Caleb helped, carrying dishes to the basin without being asked. They worked side by side, the quiet between them different now, companionable, almost easy. "You handled today well," he said as he dried a plate. "I was terrified." "Didn't show it. That matters." She glanced at him. May needed steadiness. "So did I." He set the plate down carefully. "Coming back through that storm, not knowing if—" He stopped. "I kept thinking about you and May here alone. What if something happened to us? What you'd do?" "I'd have managed." "I know you would." He turned to face her fully. "That's not the point." "Then what is?" He struggled for words, his jaw working. "When I brought you here, I told myself it was just practical. Someone to help with the house and the children. A transaction. Lena's pulse quickened. And now? Now I don't know what it is. He looked at her directly, and she saw uncertainty in his eyes, vulnerability he usually kept hidden. But it's not just that anymore. No, she said softly. It's not. The fire popped and settled. Rain drummed against the windows. They stood in the warm kitchen, two people who'd started as strangers, looking at each other across a distance that had somehow shrunk. I don't know how to do this, Caleb admitted. This wasn't supposed to. I wasn't looking for. Neither was I. But he. I know. Lena's hands twisted in her apron. It's complicated. That's one word for it. He exhaled roughly. Sarah, when she died, I thought that was it. No more. Just me and the kids and the work. Anything else felt like betraying what we had. Did you love her? Yes. The answer came without hesitation. She was good, kind. She deserved better than dying alone while I was out moving cattle. Lena's heart clenched. It wasn't your fault. Maybe not, but I wasn't there. His voice broke slightly. And now you're here, and I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. Don't know if I have any right to feel anything. You have every right. Do I? He looked at her with something close to desperation. You came here for safety, for a roof. I made promises, told you I wouldn't ask for more than work and help with the children. And now things have changed, Lena finished, for both of us. He was silent for a long moment. What do you want, Lena? The truth. She'd asked herself that question 100 times in the dark. The answer frightened her with its clarity. I want to matter, not just as a pair of hands or someone to mind May. I want... She forced herself to meet his eyes. I want to belong here. Really belong. Caleb's expression shifted. Pain and longing and fear all tangled together. You do belong. As your housekeeper? No, not... He took a step closer, then stopped himself. I don't want you to feel trapped. If you're only here because you've got nowhere else, is that what you think? I don't know what to think. Lena set down the dish towel with deliberate care. When I got off that stagecoach, I was running. From debt, from pity, from a future that looked like slow erasure. I came here because I had no choice. She paused, choosing her words. But I stay because I do. What does that mean? It means I could leave. You've never locked the door, never threatened me. If I wanted to go, I could hire on somewhere, find work, disappear. She watched his face. But I don't want to. Why not? Because this is the first place I've ever felt needed. Not as charity or burden, but as part of something. Her voice wavered. Maybe that's not love. Maybe it's just survival with a different name. But it's real. Caleb closed his eyes briefly. I need you to understand something. All right. When I asked you to come here, I made a promise. Separate rooms, respect. No obligations beyond what we agreed. He opened his eyes. I meant that. And if that's all this ever is, I'll keep my word. You won't be pressed. Won't be... I know. But if you're asking whether I feel more than that, his hands clenched at his sides. Yes, I do. And it scares the hell out of me. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. It scares me too. So what do we do? She had no answer. They stood in the firelit kitchen, the storm raging outside, years of grief and loneliness and hard-won survival, written in both their faces. Whatever was growing between them was fragile, complicated by duty and memory and the two children sleeping upstairs. I don't know, Lena said finally, but I think maybe we just keep going. One day at a time, and see where it leads. Caleb studied her for a long moment. Then slowly, he extended his hand. One day at a time. She took it. His palm was warm and rough against hers, the grip firm but not demanding. They stood that way for a handful of heartbeats, joined by touch and tentative hope. Then Caleb released her hand and stepped back. You should get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be long, cleaning up after the storm. You too. He nodded and retreated to his room. Lena stood alone in the kitchen, her hands still tingling from his touch, her mind spinning. Something had shifted tonight. The careful distance they'd maintained had cracked, revealing the longing underneath. She didn't know what came next. But for the first time since arriving in Montana, she felt like she wasn't just surviving. She was choosing. The storm blew itself out by morning, leaving the world scrubbed clean and glittering. Lena woke to birdsong and the smell of wet earth. The work of cleaning up took all day. Branches hauled from the yard, shingles replaced on the barn roof, the garden inspected for damage. May followed Lena from task to task, chattering about the storm, asking if it would happen again, declaring she was glad everyone was safe. Evan worked alongside his father, quiet and focused. But once, when Lena brought them water mid-afternoon, she saw the boy watching her, not with hostility, but with something approaching curiosity. When she met his eyes, he didn't look away. "Thank you," he said, taking the dipper. It was the first unprompted kindness he'd offered. Lena nodded, afraid to make too much of it, and moved on. That evening, after supper, Caleb asked Evan to check on the horses. When the boy had gone, Caleb turned to Lena. "I've been thinking." "About what?" "About space and privacy." He looked uncomfortable. "The house isn't big, and I don't want you to feel like you're always being watched, or I don't feel that way. Still, I thought maybe—" He cleared his throat. "I could build a bench out by the creek, somewhere you could sit when you need quiet." The gesture was so unexpected, so thoughtful, that Lena's eyes stung. "You'd do that?" "Seems right." He shifted his weight. "Everyone needs a place that's theirs." "Thank you, Caleb." He nodded, looking relieved, and left to find his tools. True to his word, he spent the next few evenings working on the bench, simple but sturdy, set beneath the cottonwoods where the sound of the creek would muffle the noise from the house. When it was finished, he showed it to her with quiet pride. Lena sat, testing it. The wood was smooth under her hands, the view peaceful. "It's perfect." "Glad you like it." She looked up at him, backlit by the lowering sun, his face half in shadow. "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "Being kind, going out of your way." He was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the distant mountains. "Because you matter, Lena. You said you wanted to. And you do." Her breath caught. "Caleb, I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "Just, I want you to know. You're not invisible here." He walked back to the house before she could respond, leaving her sitting on the bench he'd built, her heart full of things she didn't yet have words for. The days grew shorter. November arrived with frost that lingered past noon and nights cold enough to make the stove a necessity. Lena and May spent mornings baking, preserving the last of the garden vegetables, preparing for winter. Evan had begun to thaw, not warmly, but he no longer actively avoided her. Once, when she was struggling with a heavy bucket, he took it from her without a word and carried it to the house. "Thank you," she'd said. He'd shrugged. "Papa says we help each other here." It was the first time he'd included her in that "we." One cold afternoon, while Caleb and Evan were out hunting, May asked Lena to teach her to sew. They sat by the fire, Lena guiding the girl's small hands through simple stitches, mending a tear in Evan's shirt. "Mama tried to teach me," May said quietly. "But I was too little. I didn't pay attention." "You're paying attention now." May bit her lip in concentration, pulling the thread through carefully. "Do you think she'd be mad? That I'm learning from you instead?" Lena's chest tightened. "No, sweetheart. I think she'd be glad you have someone to teach you. Even if it's not her?" "Especially then." Lena smoothed the girl's hair. "Your mama wanted you to be taken care of, to have what you need. That's what mothers want." May looked up, eyes searching. "Are you going to be my mama now?" The question stole Lena's breath. I don't know. That's up to you." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I can't replace your real mama. No one can. But if you want, if it would feel right to you, I could try to be someone who loves you the way she did." May's eyes filled. "You love me?" "Yes," Lena said, surprised by how true it was. I do. May threw her arms around Lena's neck, the sewing falling forgotten. Lena held her tight, feeling the girl's small body shake with silent sobs, grief and relief, and something like permission all tangled together. When Caleb and Evan returned with the deer slung across the horse, they found Lena and May still curled together by the fire. Caleb's eyes met Lena's over his daughter's head. She saw the question there. "We're all right," she said softly. He nodded, but his gaze lingered, warm and wondering, before he turned to help Evan with the deer. That night, after the children were asleep, Caleb found Lena on the bench by the creek. The moon was bright enough to cast shadows, the air sharp with coming snow. "May talked to me," he said, sitting beside her. "About what you said, about loving her." Lena's pulse jumped. "I hope that was all right." "All right?" He shook his head. "Lena, it's—" His voice roughened. "It's more than I hoped for." She needed to hear it. "And it's true? You love her?" "Yes." He was quiet, his breath misting in the cold. "And Evan?" "I'm working on it. He's harder to reach." "He's hurting." "I know." Caleb turned to look at her, his face serious in the moonlight. "What about me?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibility and fear. Lena's heart raced. "What about you? Could you ever—" He stopped, frustrated. "I'm not asking for declarations. Just, is there a chance that this could be more than an arrangement?" Lena chose her words carefully. "I think it already is." Hope flared in his eyes. "Yeah?" "Yeah." He reached for her hand. She let him take it, their fingers threading together naturally, easily. They sat that way for a long time, shoulders touching, joined by touch and silence, and the slow, careful building of something neither of them had planned. When they finally rose to go inside, Caleb didn't let go of her hand until they reached the house. At the door, he paused. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For staying, for trying, for—" He gestured helplessly. "For all of it. You don't have to thank me." "I do, though." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "Because you could have left 100 times, and you didn't. Neither did you. This is my home. It's mine too now." Something in his expression broke open, relief and wonder, and the beginning of something that looked like joy. He lifted her hand briefly to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles, then released her. "Good night, Lena." "Good night." She went to her room on trembling legs, pressed her fingers to her lips, and let herself believe just for a moment in the possibility of more. Winter arrived in earnest the first week of December, bringing snow that fell for 3 days straight and buried the world in silence. Lena woke to a house so cold her breath hung visible in the air. She dressed quickly, layering every warm thing she owned, and made her way to the kitchen. The fire had gone out completely overnight. Her fingers were clumsy with cold as she rebuilt it, coaxing reluctant flame from damp kindling. Caleb appeared while she was still crouched at the stove, blowing gently on the struggling fire. He knelt beside her without a word, adding small sticks with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Together they nursed the fire to life, neither speaking until warmth began to radiate from the iron belly of the stove. "Should have banked it better last night," he said, sitting back on his heels. "I tried. The wind must have pulled the heat right up the chimney." He glanced at her, taking in the shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders, the redness of her hands. "You're freezing." "I'll warm up. Come here." He stood and moved to the stove, holding his hands to the growing heat. After a moment's hesitation, Lena joined him. He shifted to make room, and they stood shoulder to shoulder, letting warmth seep back into their bones. Outside, the snow continued to fall, thick and steady, erasing the world beyond the windows. The ranch had become an island, cut off and quiet, wrapped in white. "How long will this last?" Lena asked. "Hard to say. Could be days. Could be a week." "Do we have enough supplies?" "We'll manage." He looked down at her. "We always do." The children woke slowly, drawn by the smell of coffee and the promise of warmth. May came downstairs wrapped in a quilt, her hair tangled from sleep. Evan followed, pulling on socks as he walked, yawning wide enough to crack his jaw. "It's still snowing," May announced, peering out the window. "We're going to be buried." "Not quite," Caleb said, "but we'll need to dig out the barn door after breakfast. Make sure the animals have water." Evan nodded, already pulling on his coat. "I'll help." "Me too," May said. "You'll stay inside where it's warm," Lena told her. "Your brother and father can handle the barn." May's face fell. "But I want to help." "You'll help me. We've got bread to bake and mending to finish." The girl sighed dramatically, but didn't argue. She'd learned that Lena's gentle firmness meant the decision was final. After breakfast, Caleb and Evan bundled themselves against the cold and disappeared into the white. Lena watched them go. Two dark shapes quickly swallowed by the storm, and felt the old fear rise in her chest. She pushed it down and turned to May. "All right, let's get to work." They spent the morning in the warm kitchen, Lena teaching May to knead bread dough properly, showing her how to test the oven's heat with a hand held briefly inside. May's attempts were clumsy but earnest, her small face serious with concentration. "How did you learn all this?" the girl asked, punching down the risen dough with more force than necessary. "My mother taught me, before she died." May looked up. "Do you miss her?" "Every day. Even though it's been a long time." "Even then." Lena shaped the dough into loaves. "Missing someone doesn't stop just because time passes. You learn to carry it differently, that's all." May was quiet for a moment, working the dough between her floury hands. "I'm scared I'm forgetting Mama. Sometimes I can't remember what her voice sounded like." Lena's throat tightened. "Tell me something you do remember." "She smelled like lavender. She kept a sachet in her drawer." May's voice went soft. "And she used to sing when she was cooking, not real songs, just humming. It made everything feel safe." "Those are good memories to hold on to." "But what if they go away?" Lena set down her work and pulled May close. "They won't. Not the important ones. And even if some details fade, the love doesn't. That stays." May pressed her face against Lena's shoulder. "I love you," she whispered. "Is that okay? Even though Mama's gone?" Lena's eyes burned. "It's more than okay, sweetheart. It's wonderful." They stood that way for a long moment, flour dusting their clothes, the smell of yeast and warmth surrounding them. Then May pulled back, wiping her eyes on her sleeve. "Can we make Mama's biscuits, the ones she used to make for special days?" "Do you remember how?" May nodded. "Papa keeps her recipe, in the tin by the window." Lena retrieved the battered tin and opened it carefully. Inside, tucked among receipts and seed packets, she found a slip of paper covered in careful feminine handwriting. Sarah's handwriting. She touched the paper gently, feeling the weight of using another woman's words, another woman's recipe, in what had been her kitchen. "She wouldn't mind," May said quietly, reading Lena's hesitation. "She'd want you to use it." Lena looked at the girl's earnest face and made a choice. "Then let's make them together. You can show me how she did it." They worked side by side, May reciting instructions from memory, correcting Lena when she added too much buttermilk or didn't fold the dough enough times. The biscuits that emerged from the oven were golden and perfect. The kitchen filled with a smell that made May's face light up with recognition and grief all tangled together. "They're just like hers," May breathed, "because you remembered. You kept her alive in the knowing." May hugged Lena fiercely. "Thank you." When Caleb and Evan came in from the barn, stamping snow from their boots and bringing cold air with them, they stopped at the smell that filled the house. Evan's eyes went to the biscuits cooling on the table, and something cracked in his carefully maintained indifference. "Are those—" He couldn't finish. "May remembered the recipe," Lena said. "She taught me how to make them." Caleb's gaze moved from the biscuits to his daughter to Lena, his expression unreadable. Then he pulled off his hat and hung it carefully on its peg. "That was kind of you. It was May's idea." Still, he met her eyes. "Thank you." They ate the biscuits with butter and honey, no one speaking much, the silence thick with memory and something approaching peace. Evan ate 3, his face turned away so no one would see the tears he blinked back. May sat close to Lena, her small hand finding Lena's under the table and holding tight. After the meal, Caleb sent the children upstairs to rest, then turned to Lena. "Can we talk?" Her heart jumped. Of course. He gestured toward the chairs by the fire. They sat, the warmth from the stove pressing against them, the storm still raging beyond the walls. What you did today, he began, making Sarah's biscuits with May. That couldn't have been easy. It felt right. Did it? He studied her face. I worry sometimes that you feel like you're living in her shadow, trying to fill a space that's already occupied. Lena chose her words carefully. I think, for a long time I did feel that way. Like I was competing with a ghost. But today, using her recipe, listening to May talk about her, I realized something. What? She's not my enemy. She never was. Lena looked at the fire. She loved you. She loved these children. And because she did, she'd want them to be cared for. She'd want them to be happy. Caleb's voice roughened. You think so? I do. And I think maybe there's room for both of us in this house. Her memory and my presence. They don't have to cancel each other out. He was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. I loved her, he said finally. I need you to know that. What we had was real. I know, but she's gone, and you're here. He turned to face her fully. And I'm starting to think, maybe I could love you too, differently, but just as real. Lena's breath caught. Caleb, I'm not asking you to say it back. I need you to know where I stand. His hands clenched on his knees. This isn't obligation anymore. Not for me. Somewhere along the way, it became something else. Her heart was racing. For me, too. Hope flared in his eyes. Yeah? Yeah. She reached for his hand and he took it immediately, his grip warm and solid. I came here thinking marriage was just survival with paperwork. But this, you, the children, this life, it's become more than that. What is it? Home? She said simply. You're my home. Caleb's face did something complicated, relief and joy and lingering fear all at once. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it, his eyes never leaving hers. I don't deserve you. You don't get to decide that. Lena, I'm here because I choose to be, because I want to be. And if you think you can scare me off by being honest about your feelings, you're wrong. She squeezed his hand. I'm not that easy to get rid of. He laughed, the sound startled out of him. No, I don't suppose you are. They sat holding hands while the storm raged and the fire crackled, two people who'd started as strangers finding their way toward something neither had expected. When Caleb finally stood to check on the stock one more time, he paused at the door. When this storm breaks, he said, I'd like to take you into town, properly. Let people see us together. Why? Because I'm tired of people thinking this is just an arrangement. I want them to know... He stopped, searching for words. I want them to know you matter. Warmth flooded through her. I'd like that. He nodded and disappeared into the white. The storm finally broke on the fourth day, leaving the world transformed. Snow lay 3 feet deep in drifts, sculpted by wind into strange shapes that caught the light and threw it back in blinding brilliance. The sky was painfully blue, the air so cold it hurt to breathe. Caleb and Evan spent days digging out, paths to the barn, to the creek, to the road. May helped Lena tend the house, both of them watching through windows as the men worked. At night, they gathered around the fire, telling stories, playing simple games with cards or buttons, finding ways to pass the long, dark hours. It was during one of these evenings that Evan finally broke. They'd finished supper and were sitting by the fire, May drowsing against Lena's side, Caleb mending a harness, when Evan spoke suddenly from his corner. I'm sorry. Everyone looked up. The boy's face was tight, his eyes fixed on his hands. Sorry for what? Caleb asked gently. For how I've been. To Lena. He forced himself to meet her eyes. It wasn't fair. Lena's chest tightened. You don't have to apologize. I do, though. His voice cracked. You've been nothing but good to us, and I've been awful. I was so angry at Mama for dying, at Papa for bringing someone else, At you for not being her. Tears spilled over. But you're not trying to be her. You're just trying to help. And I've been too stubborn to see it. Lena set May gently aside and moved to kneel in front of Evan. Listen to me. You have every right to be angry, every right to miss your mother, and you don't have to love me or accept me or anything else just because I'm here. But I want to, he said miserably. I'm just scared. Of what? That if I let myself care about you, it means I'm forgetting her, betraying her memory. Lena took his hands. Loving me doesn't mean you love her less. Hearts don't work that way. They make room. How do you know? Because mine did. I love May. I love your father. And neither of those things takes away from loving the people I lost. She squeezed his hands. You can love us both. Your mama would want that. Evan's face crumpled. He fell forward into her arms, sobbing like the child he still was underneath the hard exterior. Lena held him, feeling his thin shoulders shake, his tears soaking her dress. Caleb watched with eyes that shone wet in the firelight, one hand covering his mouth. When the storm finally passed, Evan pulled back, scrubbing his face roughly. I'm sorry. Don't be. You needed that. He nodded, not meeting her eyes. Can we start over? Try again? We don't have to start over. We just keep going from here. Okay. He took a shaky breath. Okay. May had woken during the exchange, and now she crawled into Lena's lap, wrapping her arms around both Lena and her brother. We're a family now, she announced. A real one. Evan's eyes met Lena's over his sister's head. Yeah, he said quietly. I guess we are. Caleb came to join them, folding them all into his arms, and for the first time since Lena had arrived, the house felt whole. True to his word, Caleb took Lena to town the following Saturday. They left the children with a neighbor and drove the wagon through snow-packed roads, the sky clear and cold above them. Lena wore her best dress, her hair carefully pinned, her hands clasped tight in her lap. Nervous? Caleb asked. A little. They'll talk. You know that. Let them. He glanced at her, something warm in his expression. I like that about you. You don't scare easy. I'm terrified most of the time. I've just learned not to show it. He reached over and took her hand. You don't have to hide it from me. They drove into town holding hands, and Lena felt the weight of eyes as they passed. Caleb helped her down from the wagon with exaggerated courtesy, keeping his hand at the small of her back as they walked into the mercantile. Conversation stopped. Mrs. Patterson, the shopkeeper's wife, looked up from the counter with barely concealed curiosity. Two other women by the fabric turned to stare. Mr. Rourke, Mrs. Patterson said carefully. Mrs. Rourke. The use of her married name sent a thrill through Lena. Caleb smiled. Afternoon, Mrs. Patterson. We need supplies. And my wife would like to look at fabric. Something for a new dress. Lena's eyes widened. Caleb, I don't need... You do, he said firmly. Pick something you like. The women by the fabric bolts exchanged glances. One of them, younger and sharp-eyed, spoke up. It must be hard, stepping into another woman's shoes. Silence fell. Lena felt Caleb tense beside her, but she stepped forward calmly. I'm not trying to step into anyone's shoes, she said evenly. I'm making my own place. There's a difference. The woman's eyebrows rose. I meant no offense. None taken. Lena turned to the fabric, running her hand over a bolt of dark blue wool. This is lovely. Mrs. Patterson hurried over, eager to smooth the moment. That would suit you beautifully, Mrs. Rourke. Very practical for winter. They spent the next hour in the store, Caleb making his selections while Lena examined fabric, buttons, thread. The other women gradually drifted closer, their initial coldness thawing into curiosity. One asked about May, another mentioned the storm. Slowly, carefully, Lena was being measured and, if not quite accepted, at least acknowledged. When they left, arms full of parcels, Caleb was smiling. You handled that well. Did I? Better than well. You didn't let them rattle you. I was rattled. Didn't show. He loaded the wagon, then helped her up. I'm proud of you. The words warmed her more than the winter sun. Thank you for bringing me. Thank you for coming. He climbed up beside her and took the reins. I meant what I said in there. You're not replacing anyone. You're making your own place. I'm trying. You're succeeding. He looked at her seriously. I want you to know, whatever happens, however long this takes, I'm in this with you. Really in it. Lena's throat tightened. So am I. They drove home through the brilliant afternoon, the wagon filled with supplies and the first real evidence that their life together was becoming something the world could see. When they arrived back at the ranch, May and Evan came running out to meet them, full of questions about town and what they'd brought back. That night, after the children were in bed, Caleb found Lena on her bench by the creek. The moon was nearly full, turning the snow to blue shadow and silver light. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Cold out here, he observed. I don't mind. Lena, he turned to face her. I need to ask you something. Her pulse quickened. All right. Would you? He stopped, frustrated with himself. I'm not good at this. Words. Saying what I mean. Try anyway. He took a breath. Would you consider moving into my room? I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. But sleeping in separate parts of the house, it feels wrong now, like we're still pretending this is just an arrangement. Lena's heart hammered. And if I move in, what changes? Whatever you want to change, or nothing. We could just be together, in the same space. His hand found hers in the darkness. I want to wake up and know you're there, that's all. Nothing more unless you want it. She thought about the narrow bed in her small room, the night she'd lain awake listening to him move in the space beyond her wall. She thought about trust, about the slow building of intimacy, about the way her heart had begun to recognize his footsteps. Yes, she said. Relief flooded his face. Yes? Yes. I'll move my things tomorrow. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and they sat beneath the winter moon, holding each other against the cold and the uncertainty and the beautiful, terrifying possibility of more. When they finally went inside, Caleb walked her to her door and kissed her forehead gently. Good night, Lena. Good night. She lay in her narrow bed one last time, listening to the house settle, and felt something like joy unfurl in her chest. Tomorrow she would move her belongings across the hall. Tomorrow she would start sharing a room, a bed, a life with the man who'd offered her survival and somehow given her so much more. Tomorrow felt like the beginning of everything. Morning came soft and gray, the kind of winter dawn that held the promise of snow. Lena woke early, her heart already racing with the knowledge of what today meant. She dressed carefully, braided her hair, and stood in the middle of her small room looking at the life she'd built in this space. The trunk at the foot of the bed, the washstand, the window that looked toward the creek. It had been hers for months now, a refuge when she'd needed one. Today she was choosing to leave it. She heard movement in the kitchen and found Caleb already at the stove, coffee boiling, his hair damp from washing. He looked up when she entered, and something vulnerable crossed his face. Morning, he said quietly. Morning. They stood looking at each other across the kitchen, the weight of decision hanging between them. Then Caleb set down his cup and crossed to her, taking her hands in his. You don't have to do this if you're not ready. I meant what I said. No pressure. I know. I want to. His thumbs brushed across her knuckles. I want you to feel safe. Always. That's what matters most. I do feel safe. With you. He kissed her forehead, letting his lips linger. Then let me help you move your things. They worked together in the early quiet, carrying her belongings across the hall to the larger room that had been his alone. Caleb had already cleared space in the chest of drawers, moved his things to one side of the narrow closet. On the bed, the quilt was different from the one she remembered, newer, less worn. He saw her notice. Put the old one away, he said. Seemed right to start fresh. The gesture touched her more than she could say. Thank you. I want you to feel like this is ours, not just mine that you're borrowing. She set her hairbrush on the dresser next to his razor and comb, the simple domesticity of it making her chest tight. It already feels different. Good different? Yes. The children woke to find the change already made. May accepted it with characteristic enthusiasm, declaring that now they were a real family like in storybooks. Evan was quieter, but Lena saw approval in his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. That night, after supper was cleared and the children sent to bed, Lena stood in the doorway of what was now their shared room, suddenly uncertain. Caleb was already inside, pulling off his boots, and he looked up at her hesitation. "Come here," he said gently. She stepped inside and closed the door. The room felt smaller with both of them in it, more intimate. Caleb stood and moved to her, reading the nervousness in her face. "We don't have to do anything you're not ready for," he said. "I meant that. We can just sleep. That's enough." "I know, I've never—" She stopped, heat flooding her face. Understanding softened his expression. "Neither have I. Not with anyone but Sarah." The admission steadied her. "So we're both figuring this out." "Yeah." He touched her face gently. "And we've got time. There's no rush." They prepared for bed with careful courtesy, Lena changing behind the screen while Caleb banked the fire. When she emerged in her nightgown, he was already under the covers, giving her space to settle on her side. They lay in the darkness, the distance between them both vast and impossibly small. "Lena?" His voice came quiet through the dark. "Yes?" "Can I hold you? Just that. Nothing more." Her answer was to move closer, fitting herself against him. His arm came around her waist, pulling her back against his chest, and she felt the solid warmth of him, the rise and fall of his breathing. They lay that way until sleep took them, wrapped together like two people learning to share the same space, the same warmth, the same uncertain hope. The weeks that followed fell into a new rhythm. Lena woke each morning in Caleb's arms, the strangeness of it gradually becoming familiar, then comfortable, then necessary. They learned each other slowly, the way he slept with one arm flung over his head, how she curled on her side, the sounds they made in dreams. Intimacy grew in increments, careful and earned. One night Caleb kissed her goodnight, and the kiss lingered, deepened, became something more than comfort. When he pulled back, his breathing unsteady, Lena's hand found his face in the darkness. "Don't stop," she whispered. "You sure?" "I'm sure." What followed was tender and awkward and fumbling, both of them nervous, both wanting to get it right. When it was over, they lay tangled together, breathing hard, and Caleb's hand found hers beneath the quilt. "That was—" he started. "Imperfect," Lena finished, a smile in her voice. He laughed quietly. "Yeah, but good. Very good." He pulled her closer, kissing her temple. "We'll get better at it." "I certainly hope so." They did. Over the weeks that followed, the awkwardness faded, replaced by growing confidence and deepening trust. Their marriage became real in ways that had nothing to do with paperwork and everything to do with choice. And slowly, carefully, Lena began to believe in the possibility of lasting happiness. But the world beyond the ranch had not forgotten them. In late January, a rider came through with mail, bringing a letter addressed to Caleb in unfamiliar handwriting. He read it standing in the yard, his face going carefully blank. When he came inside, he handed it to Lena without a word. The letter was from Sarah's sister, a woman named Catherine, who lived in Denver. She'd heard through family connections about Caleb's remarriage and was writing to express her concerns about the children's welfare. The words were polite but cold, questioning whether a young woman barely more than a child herself was fit to care for Sarah's babies. She was planning to visit in the spring to assess the situation personally. Lena set the letter down with shaking hands. "She thinks I'm not good enough." "She doesn't know you. She knows I'm 18. She knows I came here through an advertisement." Lena's voice cracked. "She thinks I'm some kind of opportunist." Caleb took the letter and tossed it into the fire. "I don't care what she thinks. Caleb, she's their aunt, Sarah's sister. And you're their mother now, or as close to one as they've got." He gripped her shoulders. "Catherine hasn't seen these children in 2 years. She didn't come when Sarah died, didn't offer to help, and now she wants to judge how they're being raised? Maybe she has a point. Maybe I'm not." "Stop." His voice was fierce. "You've given everything to this family. You've loved my children when you didn't have to. You've made this house a home again. Don't let some letter make you doubt that." Tears spilled down Lena's cheeks. What if she tries to take them? What if she says we're not fit and she can't? They're my children, and you're my wife. He pulled her close. We'll face her together when she comes, and she'll see what I see, that you're exactly what this family needs. Lena buried her face in his chest, letting his certainty steady her. But the fear remained, a cold knot in her stomach that wouldn't dissolve. When she told the children about the letter that evening, carefully editing the harsher parts, May's face lit up. Aunt Catherine's coming. I haven't seen her in forever. Evan was more guarded. Why now? She didn't come before. She wants to visit, Lena said carefully. To see how you're doing. She wants to see if you're good enough, Evan said bluntly. He'd gotten better at reading the currents beneath surface words. Doesn't she? Lena couldn't lie to him. Maybe. That's stupid. His jaw set stubbornly. You're the best thing that's happened to us. The fierce loyalty in his voice made Lena's throat close. Thank you, Evan. It's true. He looked at his father. You're not going to let her take us away, are you? Never, Caleb said with absolute conviction. You're staying right here, all of us together. But the letter had cast a shadow over the house. Lena found herself second-guessing everything, the way she spoke to the children, how she kept the house, whether she was doing enough, being enough. Caleb noticed her growing tension and tried to ease it, but the approaching visit loomed over them all. February brought a thaw, the snow retreating to expose muddy earth and the first brave shoots of early grass. The ranch work intensified, fences to mend after winter's damage, calves being born, the endless cycle of feeding and tending. Lena threw herself into the work, trying to outrun her anxiety. One afternoon, while hanging laundry in the weak sunshine, she heard horses approaching. She shaded her eyes and saw 3 riders coming up the road, 2 men and a woman, all well-dressed, clearly from town. Her stomach dropped. Caleb emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his trousers. I'll handle this. But Lena moved to stand beside him, chin lifted. We'll handle it. The riders stopped in the yard. The woman dismounted with easy grace, her traveling dress expensive, her face handsome and stern. She was older than Lena had expected, perhaps 40, with Sarah's dark hair shot through with silver. Caleb, she said, her voice cool. Catherine. He didn't move to embrace her. You're early. I wanted to see for myself. Her eyes moved to Lena, assessing and sharp. And this is the new Mrs. Rourke. This is my wife, Lena. Lena, Sarah's sister Catherine, and her husband Thomas. The man who'd accompanied Catherine nodded stiffly. The third rider, younger and harder-faced, didn't introduce himself. You're younger than I expected, Catherine said to Lena. I'm old enough, Lena replied evenly. Are you? Catherine's eyebrows rose. Old enough to raise 2 grieving children? To manage a household in the wilderness? I've been managing for months now. Under my brother-in-law's supervision, I'm sure. Caleb's jaw tightened. Lena runs this household. She has from the day she arrived. Catherine's gaze swept the yard. The clean washing, the tidy porch, the smoke rising steady from the chimney. And the children? Where are they? At school, Caleb said. In town. They'll be back this evening. You've enrolled them in school? I'm surprised. I thought you'd keep them home to work. They go 3 days a week. The other days they help here. They're learning both. Catherine nodded slowly. I'd like to see the house. It wasn't a request. Lena led the way inside, acutely aware of Catherine's eyes cataloging everything. The scrubbed floors, the orderly shelves, the mended curtains. In the children's room, Catherine paused at the small table where May's schoolwork lay neatly stacked. She's doing her letters, Lena said quietly, and Evan's working on sums. They're both doing well. Catherine picked up May's slate, studying the careful alphabet practice. Sarah would have wanted them educated. I know, that's why they go. The older woman's eyes met Lena's, searching. You didn't know my sister. No, ma'am. She was kind, gentle. She would have done anything for those children. I know that too. Lena's voice was steady. May talks about her often. She remembers the stories your sister told, the songs she sang. We've tried to keep those memories alive. Something shifted in Catherine's expression. You've tried? I'd never want them to forget her. She was their mother. Nothing changes that. Catherine was silent for a long moment, her fingers tight on May's slate. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its edge. I failed them. When Sarah died, I should have come, should have helped. But I couldn't face it. Grief is hard, Lena said gently. There's no right way through it. I told myself they were better off with their father, that Caleb would manage. Catherine's eyes were bright with unshed tears. But I felt guilty. So when I heard he'd remarried so quickly, to someone so young, I thought he was just looking for help, not considering what the children needed. He was considering exactly what they needed, someone who would stay, who would care for them. Lena met Catherine's gaze directly. I'm not your sister. I'll never be her. But I love those children like they're my own, and I'm not going anywhere. Catherine studied her for a long moment, then set down the slate carefully. I can see that. I can see it in everything here. She gestured around the room. The care, the attention, the love. Then why did you come? Because I needed to see for myself, to know they were all right. Catherine's voice broke slightly. They're all I have left of Sarah. Understanding flooded through Lena. They're not all you have. You're their aunt. They should know you. May especially, she needs family beyond just us. Catherine looked startled. You'd want me in their lives? Of course. Why wouldn't I? I assumed you'd see me as a threat. You're not a threat. You're family. Lena touched Catherine's arm gently. And family is something we can all use more of. They went back downstairs to find Caleb and Thomas in stilted conversation by the fire. Catherine went to her brother-in-law and spoke quietly. I owe you an apology, Caleb. I came here expecting, well, it doesn't matter what I expected. What matters is what I found. Your wife is remarkable, and it's clear the children are well cared for. Caleb's shoulders relaxed slightly. Thank you. I'd like to stay a few days, if that's acceptable. To spend time with May and Evan, to get to know Lena better. She glanced at Lena. If you'll have me. You're welcome here, Lena said. Catherine and Thomas took rooms in town but came to the ranch each day. The children's reaction to their aunt was complicated. May remembered her fondly and attached herself immediately, while Evan was more cautious, remembering perhaps that she hadn't come when they'd needed her most. But Catherine was patient, and slowly the boy began to thaw. Over meals and quiet evenings, Catherine shared stories of Sarah as a girl, her mischief, her kindness, her dreams. Lena listened carefully, filing away these pieces of the woman who'd come before her, grateful for the chance to know her through someone who'd loved her. One evening, after the children were in bed, Catherine found Lena on the porch. May I join you? Of course. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching the stars emerge. Then Catherine spoke. I wanted to apologize to you specifically. My letter was unkind. I made assumptions based on your age, your circumstances, without knowing anything about your character. You were protecting them. I understand that. Perhaps, but it was still wrong. Catherine turned to face her. Lena, I want you to know Sarah would have approved of you. She would have been grateful that her children have someone who loves them the way you clearly do. Lena's eyes stung. Thank you. That means more than you know. And I'd like to be part of their lives going forward. If you'll allow it, not as someone looking over your shoulder, but as family. I'd like that too. Catherine reached over and squeezed Lena's hand. You're a good woman. Caleb is lucky to have found you. When Catherine and Thomas left 3 days later, it was with promises to return in the summer, to write often, to be the family connection the children needed. May cried when her aunt rode away, but they were good tears, tears of connection rather than loss. That night, Caleb found Lena in their room, sitting on the edge of the bed, looking drained. He sat beside her and pulled her close. You all right? I think so. It was a lot. You handled it beautifully, better than I did. She leaned against him. I was terrified she'd take them, or convince you I wasn't good enough. Never. He kissed her temple. You're everything this family needs. Don't ever doubt that. Even when I'm scared? especially then. He tipped her face up to his. Being scared doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And the fact that you face it anyway, that's what makes you strong. She kissed him then, pouring into it all the fear and relief and love that had been building for weeks. He responded with matching intensity, his hands tangling in her hair, and they fell back onto the bed together, seeking comfort and connection in the only way that felt adequate. Afterward, lying wrapped together in the darkness, Caleb spoke quietly. I love you, Lena. I should have said it before now. Her breath caught. You love me? Yes, truly, completely. His hand found hers beneath the quilt. I know it's not what you came here expecting. Hell, it's not what I expected either, but it's real. Tears slid down her temples into her hair. I love you too, so much it scares me sometimes. Good scared or bad scared? Both. She turned to face him in the darkness. Good because it means I have something worth protecting. Bad because I'm terrified of losing it. You won't lose it. You won't lose me. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I'm not going anywhere. They held each other through the night, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, who'd built something real from necessity and hope, and the slow, steady work of showing up day after day. March arrived with wind and rain, the last stubborn remnants of winter giving way to the promise of spring. The creek swelled with snowmelt, running fast and loud. Green pushed up through mud, grass, wildflowers, the first brave leaves on the cottonwoods. Life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. The children thrived, Evan growing taller it seemed every week, May's reading improving daily. Letters came from Catherine, filled with warmth and plans for summer visits. Caleb worked the land with renewed energy, often pausing to seek Lena out, to steal a kiss or share a quiet word. One afternoon, while Lena was working in the garden they'd begun to expand, May came running from the house. Lena, come quick! Fear spiked. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Papa wants to show you something. Lena followed the excited girl to the barn, where Caleb waited with a grin that made him look years younger. In the stall beside him, a mare stood with a newborn foal, all wobbly legs and curiosity. She dropped it an hour ago, Caleb said. Wanted you to see while it's still new. Lena moved closer, enchanted by the tiny creature. It's beautiful. Thought May could name it, if she wants. May pressed close to the stall, her face glowing. Really? Really? Can I name her Hope? Because spring is hopeful? Caleb's eyes met Lena's over his daughter's head, and something warm and certain passed between them. Hope is perfect, he said. They stood together watching the foal find its feet, taking its first uncertain steps, and Lena felt the rightness of this moment, this life, settled deep in her bones. She'd come to Montana running from loss. She'd found a family instead. That evening, after the children were asleep, Lena and Caleb walked down to her bench by the creek. The water rushed past, swollen with spring, and the air smelled of wet earth and growing things. Caleb? Lena said quietly. Do you ever wonder if this is real? If we're actually as happy as we seem to be? He pulled her closer against the evening chill. Every day. And then I wake up, and you're there, and the kids are laughing, and I know it is. I keep waiting for something to go wrong. Things will go wrong. That's life. He turned her to face him. But we'll handle it. Together. The way we've handled everything else. Together, she repeated, the word feeling like a promise. He kissed her as the stars emerged, as the creek sang its endless song, as the ranch settled into night around them. And Lena thought about the girl who'd stepped off that stagecoach months ago, frightened, alone, desperate for any kind of refuge. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd found not just shelter, but belonging, not just survival, but love. And when Caleb took her hand and led her back to the house, to the room they shared, to the life they'd built together, Lena went with her whole heart, because she wasn't just staying anymore. She was home. Spring deepened into summer, the land transforming into a riot of color and abundance. The garden Lena had planted flourished beyond expectation, yielding beans and squash and tomatoes that she preserved in jars lined neatly in the root cellar. The foal named Hope grew strong and playful, following May around the yard like an oversized puppy. Caleb's cattle fattened on rich grass, and the ranch hummed with the energy of growth and plenty. But it was the quiet moments that Lena treasured most. Mornings when she woke to find Caleb watching her in the early light, his expression soft with wonder. Evenings when the four of them sat on the porch after supper, Evan whittling while May read aloud from her school books, their voices blending with birdsong and the rustle of cottonwood leaves. Nights when she and Caleb lay tangled together, speaking in whispers about dreams and worries and the thousand small details that made up their shared life. One evening in late June, as they prepared for bed, Caleb pulled something from his pocket and held it out to her. It was a ring, simple gold, slightly worn, but beautiful in its plainness. "It was my mother's," he said quietly. "I should have given it to you before, but I wanted to wait until it meant something real." Lena's throat closed as he slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, settling into place like it had always belonged there. "It's beautiful. You're beautiful." He kissed her hand, then her lips. "And you're mine. Really mine. Not because of some arrangement or piece of paper, but because we chose each other." "Every day," she whispered. "I choose you every day." They made love slowly that night, with the tenderness of people who knew each other's bodies, each other's hearts, who'd learned that intimacy was built in layers, trust and time and the thousand small acts of showing up. Afterward, Lena lay with her head on Caleb's chest, listening to his heartbeat, turning the ring on her finger. "Caleb? Do you think she'd be happy, Sarah, with how things turned out?" He was quiet for a long moment, his hand stroking her hair. "I think she'd be grateful. That the children are loved, that I'm not alone anymore." He paused. "I think she'd like you. You're different from her in a lot of ways, but the important things, the kindness, the strength, those you share. I wish I could have known her. In a way you do. She's in the children, in the way May hums when she's happy, the way Evan gets stubborn when he's scared. In this house, this life." His arms tightened around her. "But you're not living her life. You're living yours. That's important to remember." "I know. Sometimes I just wonder if there's enough room for both of us." "There is. Hearts are bigger than we think." She turned the ring again, feeling its weight, its rightness. "I love you. I love you too. Now sleep. Tomorrow comes early. It always did." But Lena no longer minded the early mornings, the endless work, the challenges that each day brought. This life was hers, earned and chosen, and she'd stopped waiting for permission to claim it fully. July brought Catherine and Thomas back for their promised visit, along with their own two children, a boy of 12 and a girl of 9. The ranch suddenly felt crowded and chaotic and wonderfully alive. Children running everywhere, extra places at the table, voices and laughter filling spaces that had been too quiet for too long. Catherine had softened since her first visit, her warmth genuine now, her questions curious rather than critical. She helped Lena in the kitchen, sharing recipes and stories, building a friendship that felt both unlikely and inevitable. One afternoon, while they were shelling peas on the porch, Catherine spoke carefully. "I wanted to thank you for letting me be part of their lives, for not shutting me out." "Why would I do that?" "Because I was awful to you. That letter I sent, I'm still ashamed of it." Lena's hand stilled. "You were protecting them, and you were grieving. I understand that. Still, you could have held it against me, but instead you welcomed me, made space for me." Catherine's eyes were bright. "That takes a rare kind of generosity." "It's not generosity, it's what family does." Catherine smiled, blinking back tears. "Yes, it is." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the sound of children's laughter drifting from the yard. Then Catherine spoke again. "Sarah would have loved seeing this, the house full of life again, the children happy." "Do you think so?" "I know so. She always said this ranch needed more children, more noise and chaos and joy." Catherine glanced at Lena. "Have you and Caleb thought about having children of your own?" Heat flooded Lena's face. We've, we haven't really talked about it, but you'd want to. I don't know, maybe? Lena set down her bowl. Is it selfish to want that? When I already have Evan and May? It's not selfish, it's human. Catherine touched her arm. And those children would be blessed to have you as their mother, the same way Evan and May are blessed to have you now. The words stayed with Lena long after Catherine and her family had returned to Denver. She found herself watching mothers with babies in town, wondering what it would feel like to carry a child, to nurse one at her breast, to hold a piece of Caleb in her self-made flesh. One night, lying in Caleb's arms, she found the courage to raise the subject. Do you ever think about having more children? His hand stilled on her hair. Sometimes. Do you? I've been thinking about it more lately. He shifted to look at her in the moonlight. And what do you think? I think I'd like to. Someday. If you would too. A slow smile spread across his face. I'd like that very much. Really? Really? He kissed her gently. I never thought I'd get a second chance at any of this. At partnership, at love, at building a family. But here you are giving me all of it. You gave it to me first, you and the children. Then we gave it to each other. His hand spread across her stomach, warm and possessive. And if we're blessed with more, we'll face that together too. They stopped taking precautions after that conversation, letting nature take its course, not anxious, but quietly hopeful. Summer rolled into fall, the land turning gold and crimson, and life continued its steady rhythm. In September, Evan turned 11. They celebrated with a cake Lena had learned to make from Catherine's recipe, presents wrapped in brown paper, and a new saddle that Caleb had saved for months to buy. Evan's eyes went wide when he saw it, his face struggling between childhood delight and adolescent coolness. It's too much, he said, his voice cracking slightly. It's exactly right, Caleb replied. You've earned it. You work hard. You help without being asked. You're becoming a man I'm proud of. Evan's composure crumbled. He threw his arms around his father, and Caleb held him close, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Over the boy's head, his gaze found Lena's, and in that look she saw everything they'd built together. The trust, the healing, the slow transformation of a broken family into something whole. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Evan knocked softly on their bedroom door. Caleb opened it to find his son standing in the hall, looking uncertain. Can I talk to you both? They invited him in, and he sat on the edge of the bed, turning his hat in his hands. I wanted to say something, but I didn't know how to say it in front of May. You can tell us anything, Lena said gently. Evan took a breath. I know when you first came here, I was awful to you. I was angry and scared, and I took it out on you. Evan, we've already... Please, let me finish. He looked at Lena directly. You could have given up on me. Could have just focused on May, since she was easier, but you didn't. You kept showing up, kept being patient, kept... His voice broke. Kept loving me, even when I didn't make it easy. Tears spilled down Lena's cheeks. Oh, sweetheart. I want you to know you're not just my stepmother. You're my mother, the one who's here, who chooses to be here, who made this family whole again. He wiped his eyes roughly. So thank you for everything. Lena crossed to him and pulled him into her arms. He was nearly as tall as she was now, all gangly limbs and growing strength, but he buried his face in her shoulder like the child he'd been when she first arrived. I love you, she whispered. So much, Evan. You're my son in every way that matters. I love you too. The words were muffled but clear. When he finally pulled away, Caleb gripped his shoulder. I'm proud of you, for your honesty, for your heart. Evan nodded, embarrassed and relieved all at once. Can I call you Mama? If I want to? Lena's breath caught. I would love that. He smiled, shy and hopeful, and slipped out of the room. Lena turned to Caleb and found him watching her with an expression that made her heart turn over. What? She asked. I was just thinking about the day you arrived. How scared you looked. How determined. He pulled her close. And look at you now. Look at what you've become to them. To all of us. I didn't do it alone. No. But you did the hardest part. You stayed when it would have been easier to leave. You loved when it would have been safer to keep your distance. He kissed her forehead. You built this, Lena. This family, this life. You. She let herself believe it finally. Not just the practical contribution of her work, but the essential truth that she belonged here, that her presence mattered, that she had transformed from survivor to architect of something beautiful. October brought the first snow, early and unexpected, dusting the world in white overnight. Lena woke feeling strange, her stomach unsettled, a peculiar tenderness in her breasts. She lay still, taking inventory of her body, doing calculations in her head that made her pulse race. She was late, nearly 3 weeks late. She didn't say anything to Caleb that morning, afraid to hope, afraid to jinx it. But over the next few days, as the nausea persisted and her fatigue deepened, the possibility became harder to ignore. Finally, she confided in May during an afternoon of baking. Sweetheart, I need to tell you something, but you have to keep it secret until I'm sure. Can you do that? May's eyes went wide with the importance of being trusted. I can keep secrets. I think I might be having a baby. May's shriek of delight could probably be heard in town. She threw her arms around Lena's waist, flour flying everywhere. Really? Really, truly? I'm not certain yet, but I think so. I'm going to be a big sister. Wait until I tell... She stopped, remembering. Oh, it's a secret. Just for a little while. Until I'm sure and can tell your father properly. May nodded solemnly, then grinned. He's going to be so happy. She was right. When Lena finally told Caleb a week later, after a doctor's visit to town confirmed what her body had already known, his face went through a dozen emotions in as many seconds. Shock, wonder, joy, fear, and back to wonder again. A baby, he said, his hand trembling as he placed it on her still flat stomach. Our baby. Are you happy? Happy? He laughed, the sound breaking with emotion. Lena, I don't have words for what I am. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, before dropping to his knees and pressing his face to her belly. Lena's hands found his hair, her own tears falling silent and warm. I love you, he said against her skin. Both of you. All of you. When they told the children that evening, the reactions were everything they'd hoped for. May danced around the kitchen, already planning to teach the baby everything she knew. Evan's face split in a grin that made him look years younger. So I'm going to be a big brother for real? For real, Caleb confirmed. Good. Evan looked at Lena with fierce protectiveness. Then I'll help take care of both of you. The pregnancy was easier than Lena had feared, though the winter brought challenges. Morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon, exhaustion that made simple tasks feel monumental. But Caleb was attentive to the point of hovering, and the children adjusted their routines without being asked. May taking on more kitchen duties while Evan handled the heavier work. Catherine was beside herself with joy when they wrote with the news, responding with a long letter full of advice and plans to visit for the birth. Even the women in town, who'd been cool to Lena at first, warmed when they saw her condition, offering their own wisdom and well wishes. Winter passed slowly but gently, the household wrapped in quiet anticipation. Lena spent evenings sewing tiny clothes, her hands guided by May's eager help and Catherine's mailed instructions. Caleb built a cradle from oak, sanding it smooth and rubbing it with oil until it glowed. Evan carved animals to hang above it, a deer, a bear, a rabbit. For the baby to look at, he said shyly, presenting them to Lena. She held the small carvings, touched by the care evident in every detail. They're beautiful. The baby will love them. I hope so. I want... He stopped, struggling for words. I want to be a good big brother. You already are. Look how patient you are with May. That's different. May's almost grown. This baby will need more. Lena set down the carvings and took his hands. Evan, you're going to be wonderful. I have no doubt about that. And if you're ever unsure, your father and I will help you. We're all learning together. He nodded, reassured, and went back to his carving. Spring arrived late, fighting through stubborn cold before finally breaking through in a rush of warmth and green. Lena was hugely pregnant by then, moving carefully, her body unfamiliar and unwieldy. But she'd never felt more alive, more purposeful, more completely herself. The baby came on a morning in early May, arriving with the kind of speed that left everyone breathless. Lena had felt the first pains just after breakfast, dismissed them as false labor, and found herself in active delivery before noon. Caleb sent Evan racing to town for the doctor while he helped Lena to bed, his face pale but determined. "You've done this before," Lena panted between contractions, "only as moral support, and I was terrified then too." "That's not helping." He laughed shakily and gripped her hand. "You can do this. You're the strongest person I know." The doctor arrived in time to catch the baby, a girl, red-faced and squalling, perfect in every way. They named her Grace Sarah, honoring both the gift she represented and the woman who'd come before. When Caleb placed her in Lena's arms, still wet and crying, Lena felt something lock into place in her chest, a completion she hadn't known she was missing. "She's beautiful," Caleb whispered, his finger stroking the baby's cheek. "She's ours." May and Evan were allowed in to meet their sister once Lena was cleaned up and settled. They approached with reverent caution, eyes wide with wonder. "She's so small," May breathed. "You were that small once," Caleb told her. "Can I hold her?" They arranged May carefully in a chair, pillows supporting her arms, and placed Grace in her lap. The baby's crying had subsided to fussy whimpers, her tiny fists waving. May looked down at her with an expression of such pure love that Lena's eyes filled again. "Hi, Gracie," May whispered. "I'm your big sister, and I'm going to teach you everything." Evan hung back, uncertain, until Lena beckoned him closer. "Don't you want to meet her?" "What if I hurt her? I'm too rough." "You're not rough. You're careful. Let me show you." She guided his hands, showing him how to support the baby's head, how to hold her securely. When Grace was settled in his arms, Evan's face transformed, awe and terror and love all at once. "She's really ours? Part of our family?" "Really and truly," Lena confirmed. He studied the baby's face with intense concentration, as if memorizing every detail. "I'll keep her safe, I promise." "I know you will." The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feeding, of learning a new rhythm with an infant in the house. But it was also filled with moments of startling beauty. Caleb walking the floor at midnight, singing softly to soothe Grace's cries. May reading aloud while the baby dozed in Lena's arms. Evan showing his sister the animals he'd carved, already planning the things he'd teach her when she was older. Catherine arrived 2 weeks after the birth, bearing gifts and advice and an extra pair of hands that Lena welcomed gratefully. She stayed for a month, helping with the household while Lena recovered, spoiling May and Evan, holding Grace for hours while murmuring about how much she looked like Sarah around the eyes but had Lena's mouth. "You're building something remarkable here," Catherine told Lena one evening as they sat watching Caleb teach Evan to properly hold the baby. Two families woven together, the past and the present, both honored. It doesn't always feel remarkable. Sometimes it just feels hard. The best things usually do. Catherine squeezed her hand. "But look at them. Look at what you've created." Lena looked at Caleb's gentle hands supporting his son's uncertain ones, at May reading stories to her baby sister, at Grace sleeping peacefully, surrounded by love and safety and belonging, at the life they'd all built together from broken pieces and impossible odds. "Yeah," she said softly. "I guess we did all right." Summer arrived in full force, and with it came the rhythm of ranch life, planting, tending, harvesting. Grace grew stronger, her cries becoming more purposeful, her eyes tracking movement and faces. Lena carried her in a sling while she worked, and the baby became as much a part of the ranch's daily rhythm as the chickens and the cattle. One evening in late August, after supper was cleared and the children were occupied with their own pursuits, Caleb took Lena's hand and led her down to the bench by the creek. Grace was asleep in her basket, May watching over her with fierce dedication. They sat in the gathering dusk, the sound of water and birdsong surrounding them. "Do you remember the first time we sat here?" Caleb asked. "Of course. You just built this bench for me. I wanted you to have something that was yours, a place to breathe." It was one of the first times I realized this might become more than just an arrangement. He turned to face her, his expression serious in the fading light. "I need you to know something. I brought you here because I was desperate. I needed help, and I didn't know where else to turn. I made you promises I wasn't sure I could keep, offered you a life that probably seemed empty and hard. Caleb, let me finish. His thumb stroked across her knuckles. What I'm trying to say is, you could have left 100 times. When things got difficult, when Evan was hostile, when Catherine showed up questioning everything, when you realized what you'd actually signed up for, but you didn't leave. You stayed, and you turned this house into a home, these children into a family, and me into— His voice broke. Into someone who believes in second chances. Lena's vision blurred. You gave me a second chance too, a place to belong when I had nowhere else, a family when I thought I'd lost everything. So we saved each other. I think maybe we did. He kissed her as the stars began to emerge, as the creek sang its endless song, as their life spread out around them in all its complicated, beautiful reality. When they pulled apart, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. Thank you, he whispered, for staying, for loving us, for choosing this life even when it wasn't easy. Thank you for giving me the choice, for not demanding more than I could give, for letting me find my way here in my own time. They sat wrapped together until full dark, then walked back to the house hand in hand. Through the windows, they could see the children. May bent over her schoolwork, Evan reading by lamplight, Grace sleeping peacefully in her basket. The house glowed with warmth and light, a beacon in the vast Montana night. Lena paused on the porch, taking it all in. Nearly 2 years ago, she'd stood in this same spot as a frightened girl with nowhere else to go. Now she stood as a woman who'd found not just shelter, but purpose. Not just survival, but joy. What are you thinking? Caleb asked. She turned to him, this man who'd offered her a transaction and somehow given her everything. I'm thinking about that girl who got off the stagecoach. How scared she was. How certain she was that marriage was just survival with paperwork. And now? Now I know better. She reached up to touch his face. Marriage is showing up every day, even when it's hard. It's choosing each other again and again. It's building something together that's stronger than what either of you could build alone. Sounds like you've got it figured out. Not even close, but I'm learning. She smiled. We both are. They went inside together, into the warmth and noise and chaos of family life. May looked up from her work and smiled. Evan asked Caleb for help with a particularly stubborn word. Grace stirred and whimpered, and Lena lifted her from the basket, settling into the rocking chair to nurse. As she fed her daughter, surrounded by the people who'd become her whole world, Lena thought about the journey that had brought her here, the losses that had driven her west, the fear that had nearly consumed her, the slow, careful building of trust and love. She'd come to Montana looking for a home. She'd found so much more. Not just a place, but a purpose. Not just shelter, but belonging. Not just survival, but a life rich with meaning and connection, and the kind of love that grew slowly, rooted deep, built to last. The ranch would face challenges, weather, hardship, the 1,000 difficulties that came with living on the edge of wilderness. But they would face them together, this family they'd chosen to become. And that, Lena realized as Grace's small hand curled around her finger, as Caleb's eyes met hers across the room with that look of wonder that still hadn't faded, as the children's voices blended with the crackle of the fire. That was more than enough. It was everything. Outside, the Montana night stretched vast and star-filled. Inside, warmth and light and laughter. And in between, on the threshold of both worlds, stood a woman who'd found her way home, not by running toward something, but by choosing to stay. The life Lena had never dreamed of,